All right, so just wanting to go over some quick tips and tricks that I am aware of for Darkheart Thicket, just kind of generally speaking, as well as some things that are kind of exclusive to Warlocks. So just kind of starting here in Darkheart, very, very straightforward dungeon for the most part. I am going to have to actually stop and kill some stuff here, so I'm just going to kind of skip past that. This is the first kind of major thing that groups will typically expect you to know to do. Typically, it's pretty easy, just kind of follow the pack on this one. But a lot of people will also go through. This is me finishing off that last mob there. This piece right here, which you can also walk through here. The problem is if you don't have like a stealth, or if you're not willing to use Invispot, which you shouldn't have to ever use Invispot for this, you will pull the pack that is just down here. That's definitely a big problem if your tank doesn't notice that you've done that. But even if they do, there's so much percent in this dungeon that you really don't need to pull anything extra, and so avoiding basically everything you can is ideal. So I'm just going to run past all this and show kind of the next big skip that in higher keys people will actually kind of expect you to know to do this, but is also kind of something that is a bit less spoken about, which is how to skip over here with a Warlock gate. So it is very, very straightforward. It's basically just wing a Warlock gate on top of this route, basically anywhere off to the right here. Here I'm pretty close to the bears. I could have been a bit further back and still gotten it to like here. But this is just to kind of show that it works almost anywhere along this route. Anywhere basically starting like here about where my mouse is to all the way out there where my mouse is. Any Warlock gate there should work totally fine, because you're not actually trying to get to a specific point. You're just trying to get to the route. And then you can just drop down here and pretty easily just jump up and walk over here. And this green barrier is all you're trying to get to. You can also do this with Evoker Rescue, especially with a 3-person mount. You can get 4 people over here, and then you can use either VDH Infernal Strike or Warrior Heroic Leap, or even if you have like an AUG Evoker, you can use Wormstone for the last person to get them over here. Or you can actually, for this skip, because all you're trying to do is get to this kind of green barrier, those bears don't have to die at all. As long as you're close enough to it, it will trigger this. You can actually even do this with a rogue using Cloak, or Shroud, excuse me, or even just a stealth class. And then with a stealth class, you can actually hop around the bears. It's much more difficult to do that way. Or you can just use an Invispot. And like I said, as long as you get over here, this animation will start and let you through. Gate / Evoker Rescue are probably the most reliable ways. Okay, just kind of coming through this. Nothing particularly important here, just a general knowledge point. These keepers will continuously heal any flowers that are in the pool, so they are always prio targets, and while they are alive, you should not hit the petals basically at all, unless you gain damage from hitting additional targets, which there are, of course, very few classes in the game that do that. But it is just focus the keepers. Dryads don't get healed by these. It is just the petals, so cleaving off of them onto Dryads that happen to be in the pool is fine as well. But again, just avoiding the blossoms here while you're in combat with a keeper is definitely ideal. So coming to here, these mobs here, and I did ensure that I was correct in this regard. These are immune to both fear and horrify effects. So that means they cannot be feared and they cannot be mortal coiled. So the only thing that Warlocks have that can interrupt these is, of course, base interrupt, Grimoire Felguard for demonology, and infernal / blasphemy summons from destruction. And of course, Shadow Fury also being in that AoE knock category. Unfortunately, shared DR with stuns So of course, shared DR with your Infernal Summon, shared DR with your Blasphemy summons as well. And of course, shared DR with all other like Shockwave or other AoE stun effects. Leg Sweep, of course, being in that category as well. So there's not a ton that we are typically able to do to knock a large set of these at a time outside of that Shadow Fury / Blasphemy summons, which of course are going to share DR with each other and are going to quickly become immune. Worth noting that because their fear is a cast, it is affected by Curse of Tongues. It's not great. I am a big believer that Curse of Tongues is very strong, very worthwhile to use. Unfortunately, in this case, it's not incredibly strong, but can be used here if your group is lacking in kicks or lacking in knocks. Still worthwhile to put that up there because a fear on your tank or a fear on your healer can very quickly spell death for everyone. So worth taking the extra precaution. So I do want to skip back here and just not really show anything in this fight, but show him on screen here while we speak about this fight. So the big part about this fight, of course, is the knockback. A good way to get back in, depending on kind of group comp here, can be to just drop a demonic circle, take your demonic circle back. Fantastic, easy reposition. You do typically want to be stacked with your group so that you're dropping those roots exactly where you want them to be dropped. So very valuable there to reposition, get back into doing your DPS, of course. Alternatively, if you don't have a way to break the roots, and by that I mean freedoms are super common for doing this. You can also do it with Tiger's Lust, if I'm not mistaken, where you basically just either Tiger's Lust or Freedom whoever steps into a root so that it becomes attackable, so that you can do damage to it, do AoE damage to it. If you don't have that, you can actually Soul Burn, which again, this is a fantastic ability. I believe that this should be consistently taken in Mythic Plus, regardless of anything else. But with a Soul Burn and then Demonic Circle Teleport, you become immune to roots. So this will break a root that is already on you, and it basically gives you effectively freedom for the sake of these roots, where they will try to grab onto you, but they will not be able to, and so they will become attackable, just like with freedom, but we can do it. So big value in that if your group is lacking a paladin. So just to speak on that for a moment. So coming through here, not a ton that we're able to do with these ads. One thing that I have seen in some lower keys, always worth it when you are killing these, just a quick defensive. Just throw a Dark Pact, or if you're a different class, whatever your small defensive is. Of course, if you're like Moonkin, Bark form, right, maybe even Go Bear form, they do a burst of damage like a second after they die. There is a delay. It's a pretty significant delay. It's definitely noticeable. But it is a big burst of damage, and it is the same. It's basically a fairly reasonable, like 8%, 10% of your HP for each slime in the pool. So it's very easy for that to be 80% of your HP with the number of slimes that are typically pulled. So always just send a defensive on those. No reason not to. Short defensives aren't a big deal. Even coming into this boss where you do want to have defensives, they'll be back up because they're 45 seconds, 1 minute. No big deal. Another thing that's worthy of note, because I've seen this in lower keys, which is what I was going to say, these casts going off are really fucking bad. So typically they just kind of get knocked on repeat until they die. But in mid-range keys, especially like the 16 to 19, possibly even 20 range, it's really common for these just to live too long. Too long for your knocks to take care of them, too long for your kicks to take care of them. First tongues on these, really strong, especially on the Metamorphosis cast. It can make that quite long, quite reasonable to deal with. Can super help if your group could potentially be struggling with that at all. So definitely worthwhile to take the time to do that. So let's kill the boss here. Nothing super worthwhile to note on this boss outside of what I'm going to show right after I kill him here, which is there is a gate position you can do just up here past the boss. And this, when he does his downdraft, when he pushes you away, will just push you back into this wall. This is a fantastic position. The danger of this is that his falling rocks can still target you here. So if you want to use this position, typically I would recommend starting on one side and moving to the other in case the falling rocks do target you. So there is kind of the left side here, and there is kind of the right side here. So this is a large enough kind of platform that you can do left and right sides here. And this is very valuable if you have like another ranged or something. If you have like, if you're playing Warlock and you have a mage, or if you have just even your healer up here, and the Warlock gate's completely free. No stress at all. Just put it kind of on the edge here of the platform. So super, super easy to do here. I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead here, just kind of killing some mobs. Of course, these are all caster mobs, so super, super valuable to be casting Curse of Tongues on them in an actual key, just to help reduce tank damage. It is a lot of globals, so it is definitely going to make your DPS generally look worse, unfortunately. But it does help a lot with tank damage. I mean, I've definitely come through here. Honestly, it helps even with just group damage, because those imps will target DPS as well. So just reducing the amount of deaths in your key is definitely going to speed it up, first off. But secondly, overall, is going to make your DPS look better. Not because you might die, but because the pulls are going to be shorter, because people are going to be more comfortable. They're going to have to send less of their CDs to live. In every case like that, you are just going to net gain damage across the key. The key is going to be faster. So definitely worth it to be sending Curse of Tongues anytime you're concerned about these mobs casting, especially on fortified weeks. It is a ton of damage. Okay, so unfortunately I wasn't able to show off the specific cast that I am talking about. I did actually try to go to Destro here, because my Wild Imps will automatically attack regardless, so I did try to go to Destro to try and get him to cast on me, but he just won't cast his abilities on the tank, unfortunately. So, but the specific ability that this boss casts that is worthwhile for Warlocks to note is Nightmare Bolt. So Nightmare Bolt, you do see who it targets. Again, unfortunately, he is not going to target me with it because I'm the only one in the key, or I'm the only one in the dungeon, rather. But he will target typically either the healer, or just a random DPS. It does a big burst of damage, first off, so hurts. But secondly, that is what puts the circle around you on the fight that requires you to go stand with somebody else to be able to cast. It silences you unless you were standing with somebody. So to avoid that, you can use Unending Resolve, and that is basically effectively just shield wall, but for Warlocks. It's a massive DR, 40%. But the more important part of that, at least for kind of what we're talking about, is that it resists the effect that it puts on you. So you don't get affected by the circle that it puts on you. It's considered a silence effect, which Unending Resolve also makes it so that you can't be kicked, you can't be silenced. So this completely resists the effect of Nightmare Bolt. So very valuable there, especially if you are the only ranged. If you have like a monk healer or a paladin healer, you're the only ranged. You don't want to go stand in melee, because you are also going to be the primary target of the fear that he casts, the growing paranoia, which is should only, outside of pure melee groups, only target ranged, and it causes that kind of growing tendril red floor underneath you, that if somebody touches that, it fears you. So you should be the only target of that if you are the only ranged in the group. So if you have a monk healer or a paladin healer. So you definitely want to be able to resist those Nightmare Bolts if they go on you, because otherwise you won't be able to stack with anyone while you have growing paranoia. So you're just completely silenced during that time. So super big gain, potentially, if you are the only ranged in the group. Of course, that's not a super common experience, but can be, like I said, a massive DPS gain. and make just life much easier. So those are just kind of the general tips that I would go through on Darkheart Thicket. Like I said, kind of some general stuff in there as well as some Warlock specific stuff because I do main Warlock myself. I would kind of secondly just recommend on this dungeon in particular, there aren't, outside of the very, very first pull, there aren't any super massive AoE pulls. There's like the tiny slimes. Warlocks aren't really going to do a ton of damage to them. Even Demo, you're going to be outclassed by a paladin. You're going to probably be outclassed by a warrior, typically, just because they don't live long enough. Destro can't really get Rain of Fires down. Demo can like carry Imsen, but it's really kind of a bit of a waste. Feels really bad to just be sending what could potentially be a really big tyrant on these small slimes. So what I would typically recommend is considering yourself much more single target damage in this key in particular. So in that case, like there have been kind of some discussions on trinkets for Demo as far as like Valors, Nimways, with like Sea Star and Branch and stuff like that. I would probably recommend definitely running Valors and Nimways here, which is what I typically run on Demo, just because it is a very small dungeon slice sim gain to run the other ones, and those are definitely much more single target focused. But if you are kind of typically just following very strictly the sim, I would, for this dungeon, definitely recommend going with a more single target focused build, not swapping necessarily to pure single target, but just recognizing that much more of your damage done over the course of the key is probably going to be some of those more single target focus, especially with those keeper pulls that really don't want you to be doing AoE. You're a very single target in those until those keepers fall, and even in that case, you probably only have a couple petals left to kill. Like I said, that's just kind of my general advice for both Warlock and, like I said, some general in there. Thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please absolutely do check out some of the other content available on my channel, or catch me live at twitch.tv/Gadalis. Please follow so that you can receive live notifications for when I am streaming. And please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on the video.